It was just past 0600. The sky still a shade of pre-dawn steel, and the air at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center felt sharper than usual. The candidates stood at attention on the inspection deck, boots aligned, faces blank. Not one sound, save for the distant gulls and the methodical steps of Admiral Travis Geller. He moved down the line slowly, his eyes calculating, his hands clasped behind his back. The SEAL Team Leader Advanced course was no ordinary program, and this cycle, there was one outlier, Lieutenant Eden Westin. She stood third from the end, her posture perfect, her gaze steady. She was the only woman in the course, not just this cycle, but in the history of it. Geller paused in front of Briggs. A nod. Then Arlo. Another nod. Then he reached her. Silence stretched longer than it should have. She didn't flinch. He let the moment build, made a show of scanning her uniform, like something might be out of regulation. Then he spoke, low and deliberate. Tell me your call sign. Lieutenant. He knew she didn't have one. She wasn't supposed to yet. This was tradition and a trap. Her voice came calm, steady. Sable. The word cut through the still morning like a snapped wire. Some of the men turned. Arlo blinked. Briggs' jaw tightened. Then came the sound, a sharp crack of crystal against concrete. Geller had dropped his ceremonial glass. His hand shook as he looked at her. Not with contempt now, but something else. Recognition. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His face had gone pale. For the first time that morning, the tension wasn't from protocol. It was from fear, and no one, not even Westin, moved. By 0530, the candidates were already soaked in sweat. The sand stuck to their uniforms, their boots heavy with water and grit. Lieutenant Eden Westin moved like a machine, hitting every rep, every mark, without hesitation. Her form was clean, her breathing steady, her scores, if anyone bothered to look closely, consistently ranked near the top. But that wasn't what anyone saw. In the debrief tent later that morning, Lieutenant Ford Briggs stood in front of the squad whiteboard. The urban clearance sim had wrapped 2 hours earlier. Westin's team had cleared the objective zone in just under 9 minutes with 0 civilian casualties, simulated or otherwise. No alarms tripped, no shots wasted. It was textbook. Better than that. It was art. Still. Briggs barely glanced her way as he listed out what the team had done right. He credited Arlo for breach timing, Petty Officer Vance for rear security. Not a single mention of the fluid handovers or the cross-floor coverage that Westin had directed under pressure. She remained seated, arms crossed. Face unbreakable. When it came time for feedback, Geller entered the tent. His presence shifted the air. He didn't look at her. He didn't need to. He called her a political plant in front of the class once, not directly, but close enough. Said Tier 1 was no place for publicity stunts. Briggs and a few others never stopped believing it. Captain Delancey stayed near the rear. Hands folded. Quiet. His eyes flicked from face to face. When they stopped on Westin, they stayed there just a second longer. He said nothing, but he saw everything. That evening, during weapons maintenance at 1945, Westin sat alone at the far end of the bench, disassembling and cleaning her M4 in practice silence. Conversations around her carried on like she wasn't there. Arlo tossed a joke across the table. Someone laughed. Briggs didn't look at her once. She didn't need them to. But alone in the barracks, after lights out, Westin stared at the ceiling longer than usual. The overhead fan hummed in rhythm with her thoughts. Not doubt exactly, just pressure. The kind that doesn't come from failure, but from waiting. Waiting for someone to acknowledge the work that spoke for itself. No one had yet. Still. She showed up the next morning. Early, boots laced tight, rifle checked. Silent. Sharp. Ready. By 0415, the MH-60-second Seahawk was already humming on the pad, blades spinning in a tight blur, slicing the coastal wind. The air was thick with salt and tension. Eden Westin stood at the edge of the prep zone, checking gear for the last time. Her fingers moved fast but precise, muscle memory taking over. She crouched, slipped into her weighted vest, and paused. Something wasn't right. The pull on her left side was heavier, off balance, but not enough to catch most people. She unclipped the front panel and ran her hand along the inside. One of the ballast pouches had been swapped with a denser load, subtle, almost clever, but not clever enough. She didn't call it out. No raised voice, no demand for an investigation. Instead, she redistributed the weight manually, shifting balance to her hips, resecuring the strap without a word. Adapt. Don't accuse. That was her answer. By 0447, they were airborne. The Seahawk roared low over dark water. No interior lighting, save for red rigging LEDs. Westin sat near the door, head turned slightly. Watching the sea state below, she blinked once. Judging wind drift and surface chop, 15 knots. Northern pull. Foam trails, like veins. No words, just data. The insertion came fast and quiet. Ling Wuling San. Splash down. Cold water wrapped around them instantly, biting through gear and skin. Visibility dropped to a few feet. The ocean was all movement and murk. Westin surfaced, gave a hand signal to adjust bearing. Not standard, not wrong, but different. Lieutenant Arlo hesitated for a beat, then followed. Westin took point, slicing through water like she belonged to it. Her swim line was smooth. Minimal correction strokes. No wasted motion. Her hands moved with eerie precision, not just trained, but patterned. Something beyond SEAL school. Something older, deeper. The team kept pace, but it was clear she was leading, not just by position, but presence. She paused once at a submerged marker buoy, scanned without breaking rhythm, then shifted course a few degrees west. Accounting for current, no one questioned her. Not yet. Arlo kept watching. Her hand signals were close to what he knew, but altered, more efficient, cleaner, and they worked. She navigated around a shadowed reef blind, led them past a roving patrol boat without triggering light sensors. Her timing felt less like luck and more like clockwork. The swim ended just below the objective zone. The oil rig loomed above them, black steel against a gray sky. No voices, only breathing. Westin surfaced first, checked the platform, gave the signal to hold. Not one sound escaped. She stayed still for 4 full seconds, then submerged again without explanation. Nobody said it out loud, but they all felt it. She wasn't just surviving this op. She was moving through it like she'd done it before. Exactly this way, in exactly this water. And that was the first time Arlo wondered if maybe Eden Westin wasn't learning to lead them. Maybe she was just remembering how. By 0529, they had eyes on the platform. Rusted girders stretched above the waterline, barnacle-crusted and slick with age. The decommissioned rig loomed like a forgotten skeleton, half in shadow, half swallowed by sea fog. The team surfaced, breathing through their regs, waiting for the call to recon and breach. That was the protocol. Instead, Westin raised one hand, not the standard sign to hold, not advance. It was unfamiliar. A flat palm, angled, swept low, and then she was gone. No comms, no glance back. She slipped beneath the waterline like vapor, vanishing into the steel underbelly. Arlo blinked, then signaled to the others. Confused, but committed, they followed. Inside, the space narrowed fast. Visibility dropped under 5 feet. Algae drifted in lazy swirls. Every kick echoed against pipe and hull. The water pressed in, cold and indifferent. Red lights embedded in the walls blinked in and out as simulated enemy sensors tracked movement. Westin moved through it like she was part of it. She didn't hesitate. Didn't correct her course. Her body arched and twisted through submerged corridors like she already knew where each sensor sat. She never touched a wall. Never triggered a trip point. From behind, her path looked random. Arlo clocked each turn, trying to make sense of it. It didn't match anything they'd studied. They passed through a crawl duct barely wide enough for gear and re-emerged near the central chamber. Up ahead, Briggs's team was moving in fast from the far side. Their chatter filtered in through proximity mics. They had visual on the extraction dummy. Another 30 seconds, and it would be theirs. Then Westin struck. She swam low into a service shaft, paused, and adjusted a corroded valve near the intake line. Seconds later, sediment flushed from the floor. Not enough to raise alarms, just enough to cloud the corridor between the teams. In the blur of brown and gray, visibility collapsed. Westin's team moved in. Silent, surgical. By the time the sediment cleared, the extraction target was gone. Briggs's team had no idea what happened. The only sign was a faint trail of bubbles and the echo of water shifting. They regrouped at the exfil point. Quiet, breathing heavy. No one spoke. Not even Arlo. Because somewhere in that dark silence, as the team drifted beneath rusted beams and barnacle-covered bolts, they'd all felt the same thing. Westin hadn't improvised. She'd remembered. By 0915. The debrief room was already full. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air was still damp, with salt and sweat from the morning's apopleison. Lieutenant Eden Westin sat near the end of the long table, arms folded. Face unbreakable. Across from her, Admiral Geller leaned forward with the weight of authority. He opened with praise for efficiency. Not hers. Briggs's team. Then, with barely a pause, he turned. He called her tactics reckless, questioned her deviation from standardized entry protocol, accused her of risking detection by improvising, said the sediment maneuver was showboating, not strategy. Westin didn't flinch. Her voice was even clear. She broke down the structure's layout, identified sensor clusters by placement and signal pattern, explained her choice to shift ingress vector based on real-time current analysis. She cited regulatory clauses allowing for adaptive maneuvering under variable maritime conditions. Nothing she'd done violated protocol, just bent it. Smartly, the room fell quiet, not because of what she said, but how she said it. Clean, precise, like someone used to operating under scrutiny. When Geller pressed further, asked where she learned those methods, she replied calmly, "Not every effective tactic is written down." No one laughed. No one smirked. Even Briggs looked away. Arlo's eyes stayed on her. Later that evening, at 1840, he pulled her personnel file from the secure system. The basics were there. Annapolis, top of her class. But half the service record was redacted. Operational history marked classified under Joint Command. That was rare. Almost unheard of for a lieutenant. Geller's office door shut harder than necessary after the meeting. Inside, he stood by the window. Jaw clenched. She wasn't supposed to be here. He had blocked candidates like her before. This one got through. Worse. She was proving him wrong in front of his own people. Captain Delancey stood in the hallway as the door slammed. He didn't speak, just watched. He had served long enough to read the shifts when they came. Westin wasn't just another political case. There was weight behind her presence, and someone, somewhere, had made sure she stayed invisible until now. He began to wonder why and who she really was. By 1522, the live-fire CQB drill had shifted from routine to crisis. Somewhere between the second breach and stairwell clearance, the lights cut out. Then the smoke started, thick, Acrid. Real. Alarms blared across all levels of the facility. What should have been simulation turned into confusion. Operators broke off in twos, navigating blind through corridors designed to trap and disorient. In the control center, red panels blinked across the master board. A system fault had triggered a full lockdown. Bulkheads sealed. Magnetic overrides frozen. The fire suppression wasn't responding. Admiral Geller leaned forward behind the glass observation deck, his hand clenched tight around the edge of the console. He barked for updates, for answers. None came fast enough. The only thing the techs could confirm was that Briggs' unit was trapped on sublevel 2. Comms with them were garbled and unreliable. Eden Westin's team had already cleared and was accounted for. They were moving toward the south exit when she stopped. Without hesitation. Without a word. She turned around and headed back into the smoke. Cameras caught her silhouette moving deeper into the chaos. Visibility inside was dropping fast. But she didn't hesitate. At 1527, she reached the sealed door holding Briggs and the others. The panel was fried. She knelt beside it, fingers working the console. 13 seconds passed. The lock disengaged. What she used wasn't a brute force hack. It was a bypass. An old one. A classified developer sequence decommissioned nearly a decade earlier. Briggs stumbled out first, coughing. The others followed, wide-eyed. She didn't stay to explain. She kept moving, down 2 more levels. Smoke choking the halls. She found the secondary system node. The core panel was flickering with heat damage. She slid into position, rerouted the emergency bypass, and manually triggered the ventilation purge. Fresh air slammed through the ducts. Suppression kicked on. Smoke began to clear by 1, 5, 3, 4. The emergency was over. The room above remained silent. A visiting Marine Corps general stared at the monitor. One of the technicians leaned in, whispering that the override she used shouldn't have been accessible. Not anymore. Geller said nothing, just turned away from the screen. Face tight. She hadn't hesitated, hadn't checked in. She had simply acted, and everyone in that room now had the same question. How did she know? By 1000. The culmination ceremony was already in motion. The auditorium inside the Naval Special Warfare Training Center pulsed with quiet formality. Flags lined the back wall, each perfectly measured in height and spacing. Rows of tridents rested on velvet-draped pedestals, their gold surfaces catching stage light in sharp reflections. Seats were filled with crisp uniforms and silent eyes. Senior brass, foreign officers, a few hand-picked family members. The air held the weight of tradition thick, reverent, rigid. One by one, trainees were called forward. Each approached the stage, saluted, and received their trident and call sign from Admiral Geller. The responses were brief, rehearsed. Applause followed on cue. Lieutenant Ford Briggs stepped forward, just past 1017. Geller praised his initiative during the lockdown and announced his call sign, Beacon. The crowd responded with more energy this time. A few nods, one admiring glance from a foreign attaché. Then the room settled again. Only one seat remained occupied. Lieutenant Eden Westin. Her name was called last, not by oversight, by design. She stood, calm, and made her way to the stage. Each step echoed sharper than the last. Geller watched her approach with something cold beneath the surface. The silence stretched. He held her chalice in one hand. A smirk touched the corner of his mouth. He asked her, in front of everyone, to state her most significant operational achievement. No one else had been asked. Westin met his eyes. No trace of discomfort. No pause. She declined, citing classification. Professionally, calmly, Geller's smile held. He opened his mouth, preparing to dismiss her, to claim she hadn't earned a call sign. She beat him to it. Sable. Just that. A breath in the room caught. The air thinned. Geller's face drained of color. His fingers slipped. The silver chalice struck the stage and shattered, metal shards rolling off into silence. Every officer froze. Some leaned forward. One foreign general stood. Geller whispered it once under his breath. Barely audible. The name wasn't supposed to exist. It was buried. Black tier classified. Not in any official record. But she'd just spoken it. In public. And everything changed. The silence still held when Captain Delancey stepped forward. At 1024. He reached for the collar of his uniform and removed the rank insignia with a slow, deliberate motion. Beneath it gleamed the silver stars of a rear admiral. Naval intelligence. He turned to the room. Lieutenant Eden Westin was not a trainee. She was the operative known as Sable. 7 years ago, she had carried out an unsanctioned extraction in hostile North Korean territory. The mission, Codename Songweil, was not listed in any known report. It had never been publicly acknowledged. 6 SEALs had been written off. One of them had been then Captain Travis Geller. Rear Admiral Delancey explained that the mission had been deemed too politically volatile to authorize. No assets were dispatched. No rescue was planned. So she went alone. She completed the mission, took 2 gunshots, broke 3 ribs, brought every man home, and then she vanished. Her injuries were masked, her record sealed, her identity buried so deep that only 5 people had ever been cleared to use the name Sable again. Until now, her presence in the SEAL leadership program wasn't symbolic. It was tactical. Naval intelligence suspected the original mission had been compromised by someone inside U.S. Command. That betrayal had never been resolved. Her assignment here was the final layer of exposure. Her performance, her silence, the pressure they applied, all part of the test. And every attempt to discredit her only narrowed the list of suspects. Because truth survives, when resilience does, and today, it had surfaced. By 1032. Admiral Geller stepped down from the stage. No one stopped him. No words were exchanged. There was no announcement. No formality. Just the sound of his footsteps fading into the aisle. The silence behind him spoke louder than anything he might have said. Rear Admiral Delancey turned back to the podium. In his hands was a single gold trident. Its surface bore no engraving. No date. Just weight. He walked it to Eden Westin and placed it in her hand. It was the only trident ever awarded off-record in naval special warfare history. And now, for the first time, it was presented in view of the entire command. No one clapped. No one moved. They stood slowly, silently, as if realizing all at once what they'd failed to see. Later, after the room had emptied, Lieutenant Arlo found her outside. No questions. No yokes. Just a slow salute. The first she received that hadn't been instructed, prompted, or required. She returned it. Small and steady. The sun had climbed high by 1110 when Westin reached the memorial wall. 6 names carved into polished black stone. She traced her fingers across one. Captain Roy Camden. Her fiancé. The only one she couldn't bring home? His name had never left her lips during the training. Not once. And now everyone understood why. She stood there for a moment longer, then stepped back. As she turned to go, a group of fresh recruits passed by in formation. Their cadence echoed down the path. One girl, barely 20, broke stride just enough to glance at her. They locked eyes. She gave a simple nod. Westin nodded back. A quiet echo passed between them. Then the moment moved on. No medals. No speeches. Just memory. And something left behind that would carry forward